Well, I think we will get started. It is 1 o'clock here in the East Coast. We still have some people trickling in, so let's get started. Welcome to the back half of day number 3 here for our Hahnemühle Community Days. If you've had a chance to watch some of the presentations, in my opinion, they're simply inspiring. They will be uploaded to this platform probably within 24 hours if you want to watch again, so please do. I'm Kevin Graham. I'm the sales manager for the Eastern US and Canada. I'm based in Metro New York City area. And speaking of Canada, we are off to Hamilton, Ontario, the home of Smokestack Studio. Now, for reference, Hamilton sits about an hour west of Niagara Falls, New York. It's tucked in the corner of Lake Ontario. So if you're taking the QEW and you make that turn heading up to Toronto, that Jonathan knows very well, that's where you'll find Hamilton. Jonathan and his brother Lane are owners of Smokestack, and they are a Hahnemühle certified studio. They specialize in a lot of great things, including digital fine art. Their site says that they love details, and I like that. We love details. And also analog, printmaking, and limited editions. If you have an idea, they will make it happen for you. Smokestack Studio is the real deal. This afternoon, Jonathan is going to talk about the equipment that he uses, why he uses it, and talk about the paper choices that are out there. All very relevant. If you print and want somebody to print for you, then this is all very relevant. So drop your questions in the Q&A. Jonathan, great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here and have the opportunity to talk to everybody and show them around Smokestack. Like you mentioned, we're a fine art print studio here in Hamilton. We have been in business now for over 9 years and kind of growing in spurts and spatters over that time, taking on new equipment and new endeavors. And really our focus here is working with professional artists, museums, galleries, collectors and creators of all kinds, visual kinds, I guess, to produce fine artwork for public exhibition, private sale, collections, those kinds of things. We've got a pretty wide range of things that we offer here. So at Smokestack, we specialize in both traditional printmaking processes. That's the side of the studio that I'm coming to you from right now. Digital printmaking processes, and then also all the finishing and that kind of stuff that comes along with it. So between the digital and analog side of the studio, we probably cover about 500 years worth of printmaking processes, right from early printmaking processes up to contemporary digital print processes. And certainly Hahnemühle papers are in no short supply around here, it's something that's used very heavily on both sides of the studio, which makes us a little bit of a unique kind of place in, I guess, the Hahnemühle certified world, having both the analog print studio and the digital studio right next to each other. So before I talk too much specifically, I thought I would take a few minutes to walk everyone around the studio, show you the full kind of extent of what we've got going on here, because that might help inform some of your questions and those kinds of things. And then we can get a little bit more into the nitty gritty. So like I mentioned, I'm coming to you right now. I'm going to flip the camera around here for everybody, from the analog printmaking studio. So all manners of traditional printmaking happening here. Copperplate etching, intaglio, silkscreen, relief printing, aqua tint, you name it, it can pretty much happen here. The only thing that we don't really do, I guess, is stone lithography. Although we used to have a press for it here, we don't really anymore. You can see a couple of etching presses here. This is kind of like the Ford versus Ferrari story of printmaking. We've got the Praga press, which is made very locally here in Scarborough. I think this is from the 80s. And then we've got the finely crafted Italian printmaking press here. Exactly what you would expect from an Italian printing press. Beautiful lines, nice chromed accents, and then of course the super utilitarian Praga press. Both do essentially the same thing. They just look a little bit different. Just more prep space here. This big unit in front of me is a big vacuum table for silk screening. We've got a big washout station back here for washing out screens. got a dark box here to put coated screens, all of our ink storage and everything. So that's a bit of a look at the analog studio. We originally started in this space, again, about 9 years ago, then had the opportunity to take over a space next door here as things kind of grew. And that takes us into the digital print studio here at Smokestack. So you can see some storage and things over on this side. There's never seems to be enough flat files. We have so many flat files around this place. We work with a couple of different fine art printers here. This machine is our primary fine art printer. This is the Epson SureColor P20000, 64-inch, prints on all kinds of materials. I mean, in my opinion, the best printer out there. We actually had the first one of these in Canada when they were released about 6 years ago. Couple of computers here. This one is just meant for driving the printers. This is where more of the digital work happens. We use all ISO monitors for any of our final proofing and that kind of stuff. And then over on this side, we've got an Epson Stylus Pro 11880. Also gets used a whole bunch here, but a little bit differently than the P20000. We tend to, or one we offer is printing on a lot of unique materials or non-traditional materials like really fine Japanese papers, fabrics, other handmade papers and those kinds of things. So because of the way this machine works, we tend to use it more for the experimental stuff, whereas the P20000 is really our kind of driving force behind putting out a lot of the fine art prints that are produced here. And then obviously big tables here, racking for storage and all that kind of stuff, archival glassine for packing, preserving the integrity of prints and the longevity of prints is a big part of what we do here. And so we put a lot of effort into making sure things are packed and stored and all that kind of stuff in a way that is going to preserve them for as long as possible. Over here, this is where all the calibration happens. All of our printers and papers are custom profiled. For that one, we use the i1 Photo Pro 3 Plus, plus the i1 IO scanning arm. So it's all automated, makes things really quick and easy. This is just kind of a reference or look at the charts that come out of that. A bit of an involved process, but having the automated arm makes it much, much quicker. As you can see, our nice Hahnemühle certified studio plaque up here. Over on this side, enter out into, this is one of our entryways into the studio. You can see here, paper and media storage galore. Hahnemühle with its own wall as you kind of walk right into the studio. We do carry a bunch of other papers and materials. We audition for a lot of artists who, use different materials and those kinds of things. And so we're not necessarily tied to one brand, but certainly, recognize the level of quality that comes out of Hahnemühle papers. As we move further back into the studio here, it's a little bit dark in here. So this is a prep space for silk screens. So here we have an big oversized exposure unit, all the screens here. So we can literally go from concept to final print in just a matter of minutes, really. We print all of our own films in-house, coat the screens, shoot the screens, and then we're making prints. As we move over further into this space, into the void here, I like to call it the void because that's basically what it is. This is a very specialized documentation and reproduction studio. So I work a lot with artists producing original works of art. Right now I've got a piece by Susanna Bleasby up on the wall. But they'll bring us their originals. We photograph everything with the 150 megapixel phase 1 IQ4 camera. So there is no lacking in resolution from this. And then along with that comes the color calibration and matching and that kind of stuff. So we're using golden thread color targets. And then all of that is integrated through Capture One Cultural Heritage, which is a specific subset of Capture One meant specifically for archiving and documentation work. So we can essentially make perfect one-to-one reproductions of original artworks using this setup, or just providing really, really high quality documentation for archiving purposes and that kind of thing. Otherwise, the lights here are photon DTXL lights. And then as we move over to the kind of back end here, again, you'll see more flat files, never enough flat files. And then just some of the back end workflow here. This particular machine is meant to do all of the documentation work. And then this setup in front of me here is relatively new to the studio. We brought this in late last year. And this is the next generation of film scanning technology. So rather than scanning negatives like a traditional scanner, a flatbed scanner, Imicon, drum scanner, that kind of thing, this is actually developed through phase one, integrated through Capture One Cultural Heritage. And rather than scanning negatives, and you'll actually see this is something we're working on right now, photographing old 8x10 transparencies of reproductions. So instead of actually scanning the negatives, we're photographing them in super high resolution, again, using the 150 megapixel phase one IQ4, and producing the scans that way. So some of the real benefits of this system, first off, the IQ4 has like a 15 to 17 stop dynamic range. So it's not necessarily really to, and you can see here all the film holders and things, so the specialized film holders and everything meant to work along with that system. But it's not necessarily to bracket exposures on films to maximize the tonality of the film. The resolution is exceptional for 35 millimeter negs. We're getting scans of over 10,000 pixels per inch. For an 8x10, you're looking at about 2,000 pixels per inch, but through Capture One Cultural Heritage, we also have the ability to kind of interpolate, I suppose, up to 250% with pixel perfect resolution. So I've been taking 4x5 negatives up to about 80 by 120 inches, again, with absolutely perfect resolution. So it's a really amazing setup. And then one of the other real benefits is the speed. Rather than with a traditional scanning setup where a single high-res scan might take you 30 minutes, because this is all instant capture, you can move from one frame to the next in the snap of a finger. So what might take you normally hours and hours and hours or weeks or months to do for an archiving project using, say, a traditional Imicon scanner or a flatbed scanner or a drum scanner, we can accomplish the same amount of scanning in a matter of hours. With no sacrifice in quality. So that's kind of what happens in the digital zone here. And then I'm going to run you up the hall really quickly just to show you the finishing side of Smokestack, and then we can get into a little bit of the nitty gritties about things.
Hey, one of the questions, Jonathan, is has the pandemic opened up new avenues of services that you're offering? Are any of these services that you're talking about new within the last 2 years?
Yes. So actually the reproduction equipment and the scanning equipment is all relatively new to us in the last 2 years. Reproductions were something that I was doing before, but not with the same level of refinement that I am now with the phase one setup and that kind of stuff. That's new. Actually, I'll just wait out here for a second. And then so is the film scanning as well. That's also new. And really, I think the pandemic has not forced, but encouraged a lot of people and a lot of artists to reconsider the ways that they can monetize their work or disseminate their work. And, for a lot of painters and illustrators and those kinds of things, making reproductions has become a very viable and lucrative way of monetizing their artistic process. So I've definitely seen an increase in that over the pandemic. And that was one of the reasons that we really decided to kind of bring in and make the investment in all of that new equipment. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit, but
yes, it does. Thanks very much. Very, very much. Thanks.
Excellent. And now I'm going to pop us into the rest of our space up here. So we're about to enter Smokestack Gallery. We just hung this show yesterday. This is work by Nathan Carson. Our opening will be happening tomorrow night. So this space is kind of the latest evolution of Smokestack, although it's a number of years old now, probably about four or 5 years now. But what we've got on display here is all a selection of mono prints by Nathan Carson, printed here at Smokestack. In the gallery, we focus on showing the work of artists who are producing here at the studio, to kind of really make the connection between product and process. There aren't many galleries where you can go and literally see the finished work, but then walk down the hall and also see the space where it was produced, and talk to the people who produced it. So it kind of closes that gap between the product and the method of production. And particularly when we're talking about printmaking and even digital printing and that kind of stuff, it's often something that not people know a lot about or how it's done. So it's a nice way to kind of pull back the veil, I guess, of mystery about the artistic process. And then in the back here, we've got Lisa back there. She's our mounting master. So back here, we do all manners of mounting in preparation for finishing. So laminating prints, mounting them to archival boards, mounting in preparation for framing. Big roll, all of our adhesives and laminates and those kinds of things are all cold roll pressure sensitive adhesives. We use all Neshin adhesives, and then in the back side here you can just see cutters galore, big saws, alu panel, aka Dibond for mounting. This is probably our most popular material, and yeah, that's what happens up in the back here. And then in the front as well, that's kind of part of the gallery. We also have a partnership with Superframe. They're a really top-end frame maker in their production space is located in Toronto, but we're essentially their Hamilton showroom location. So we do all the quoting and invoicing and client interaction and that kind of stuff on this end on their behalf, and then all of the production is actually done by them. So it's really great for us because it gives us an opportunity to offer the best of the best in fine art framing to all of the artists that we work with. And many of the artists that we work with are already working with them to begin with. And so it just kind of rounds out that production process to offer the best possible final result. So that's kind of I guess a look around Smokestack and what we do here. And I'll pop back down to the studio really quickly, and then we can dive into some other stuff.
A question has come up concerning this beautiful building that you're in. I've been there before.
Yes.
It's quite the place. I mean, it's stunning on the outside, but the refinishing on the inside is very impressive. Can you make a comment?
For sure. So as you can see, there's a little bit going on here right now, but we are located in the historic cotton factory building here in Hamilton. It's basically just at Barton and Sherman. It's probably the closest major intersection. Originally built in 1909 for the Imperial Cotton Factory or Imperial Cotton Company. It was repurposed a number of years ago and has quickly kind of been grown into a major arts and culture hub here in Hamilton. And if anyone is familiar with the 401 Richmond building in Toronto, also Studio Dog, this is Oreo, had to introduce him. But it's members of the same family who also own that building there. And it's also recognized as being a major kind of arts and culture hub in Toronto. So we're in a great place here, having landlords who are not just promoters of the arts, but are creators of opportunities for artists and makers of all kinds. We're surrounded by I don't even know how many people are in the building, but makers of every bent that you can imagine, from stained glass to woodworkers to concrete form makers to cabinet makers. everything is here. So even if oftentimes we don't do something here, we can find someone in the building who does. So that's kind of a match made in heaven. So yeah, that brings us back to, you know, the production space here at Smokestack, and I can kind of go into, I don't know, Kevin, if there were any other specific questions that have come out while I was talking that I can cover, or if you want me to just dive into some things.
Yeah, let's just dive into things. You got some thumbs up on this beautiful facility that you're in. It is
awesome.
It really is, and it's got to be inspiring. It has to be.
It is. I mean, if you asked me all those years ago when we first started this place, whether this is what it would look like, I'll put this back on my face so everyone can kind of see me here. If this was how it would look after 9 years, I probably would have said you were crazy. But very thankful, and you know, we're a product of the community that while we work very hard to support the arts community around us, we recognize that we don't exist without them as well. And so we're always trying to, you know, do what we can to help support artists and create their work. So I guess, you know, on a technical level, or on a more kind of studio based level, you know, why come and work with a place like Smokestack? What differentiates us from you know, from other studios that do similar things, of which, you know, there are some, although I don't think that there are quite so many, or not many places that really have the connection of the analog and the digital being right next to each other. And oftentimes we have artists that are experimenting and working kind of hybrid across digital and analog printmaking processes. So that's a really unique thing that we can offer the artists that are coming here. So, you know, that's I think that's kind of what sets us apart here, is our ability to, and again, my brother and I both, my brother, his name is Lane, master printmaker in the analog realm. But, you know, one of the things I think is very close to both our hearts is the fact that people can come here with their project. Maybe it's already done and all they need is the finishing, but maybe it's just in its early stages of conception. I mean, we work with a lot of artists who are producing major exhibitions and those kinds of things. And, you know, they're trying to think about, well, how can I take this concept and visualize it? How can I turn it into a thing? And, you know, what are the different methods that I can use? And obviously one method is not as, or, you know, may produce not necessarily a better result, but a much different, equally as great, but different result. So, and materiality for me has always been a big part of that. And, you know, a lot of times in the digital world, because I manage everything in the digital side of the studio here, you know, it had been my experience in the past, either through working at other places or, you know, printing my own work before I had my own studio, was, you know, you walk in and you say, hey, what are my options? And I say, hey, here's the 5 papers that we have. Which one do you want? And that always felt very limiting for me. I've always been very interested in materiality and how that connects to the concept of the work, and how you can kind of use materiality to make the work not just look better, but say more, you know, particularly when it is conceptual work. So that's something that's always kind of been at the center of the evolution of the digital side here, is, you know, how can we offer a really amazing selection of materials here at the studio to kind of, obviously you can't always find, you can't carry everything, but what are the papers that really kind of fit with the widest range of projects? And certainly, you know, if there are times when if the right project comes in, so there's something very specific that someone needs, that will bring in a custom material for them, because either it just needs to be done for that project, or it's something that I haven't even found before, and they, you know, it's something that someone has brought to me that they say, hey, you know, are you aware of this material? And maybe while I'm talking about papers, I'll just run everybody over back to our Hahnemühle wall here and show you the materials that we're covering or that we print on here that I think are really fantastic. So for my own work, actually, I've been printing on the Hahnemühle bamboo paper for many years. I would say, well over a decade now. 290 GSM, beautiful feel. A little bit warmer white base. A lot of my own personal work has been based around vegetable gardens. So when it comes to like printing really rich greens and reds and those kinds of things, the warmer white base I find tends to really help with that, or just, bring out a little bit more. But otherwise, the kind of new additions to that natural line, which the bamboo, I guess, was the flagship paper of, we've got the agave, and then the hemp, and then there's a new one that's going to be coming out soon. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say about it, so I'm not going to reveal what it is.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Sugarcane, yeah, it'll be out, be available in the next probably 60 days or so. A question did come up regarding printing. Eric Blum, how do you mount a paper print to Dibond? That question's come up, and you mentioned Dibond in the background.
You bet. So Dibond is a brand name product. Just to make that clear, really that means like when we're talking about Dibond, we're talking about aluminum composite. The product that we use is called Alupanel. It's spec for spec exactly the same, but manufactured by another company in the UK. So the process for that is essentially we, obviously run the print on whatever paper it is. Then we cut the board to match that size. When we're mounting on Alupanel, we're always printing with bleed so that we can trim the edges really flush and clean. And then an adhesive will be applied, a cold roll pressure sensitive adhesive. So it's not like dry mounting, which a lot of people tend to be familiar with from the kind of traditional photographic finishing world. But it's a pressure sensitive adhesive that's applied to the board. It comes on big rolls, and then essentially the print is laid over top of it. Also run through the big press that you would have seen up the hall there, again under pressure, and then it's permanently adhered.
Interesting, and this spins off on the next question from Yoram. I was under the impression that collectors preferred access to the back of the print for signature and other information. By using a dry mount, say, makes the back end accessible. What is the story here for emerging photographers who does his own printing and framing? This sounds to me like you deal with this every day, I suspect.
For sure. So I think, again, from a traditional photographic standpoint, that is definitely, I think, was the standard. And this is, partially also because in a traditional photographic realm, this is before the invention necessarily of these, big pressure sensitive adhesive roll mounters or even archival adhesives in that manner. All of the adhesives that we're using here are archival. When we're talking about archivability, we're talking about the presence or absence of acid, because over time acids are going to leach into and discolor the paper. So all of our adhesives are pH neutral. So in a more traditional standpoint, I think that, that was the tradition when most photography used to be, mount or framed using a top mat and a more classical style of framing that didn't require prints to be mounted. So nowadays, when we're talking about, about framing, a lot of times people are finishing using a shadow box. So there's no mat around the image. It comes right to the edge of the frame. It's a very clean, contemporary way of doing things, or work isn't even going into a frame at all. As part of laminating, we can protect prints by laminating them and then mount them to a board. And it's kind of a finished standalone piece. So in that sense, once the print is mounted to the board, it cannot be removed. So that then is the object. And so for most artists, once their piece is mounted, they'll sign the back of the mount. And that way, the authentication is still tied to the print and that object, because there's no way to separate the two without just completely destroying it.
Perfect. Yeah, I think
Does that
yeah, I think that makes it. And Yorm's got my email address, so if there's specifics with that, we can follow up separately. Thank
Yeah,
you. Perfect.
and you know the mounting side of things is it's a whole other ball of wax. I actually got my start in this industry doing that, and I said after I did that I was never going to get into that business again. And when I started the printing studio, I said I was never going to get into mounting, because it's one of those things that a lot of people think should just be super easy. And it's like, oh well, all you're doing is sticking a piece of paper to a board. It's like putting on a sticker, right? Which essentially it is, except oftentimes these are stickers that are 60 by 120 inches and on paper, and a single speck of dust can in some cases ruin a complete mount job, and you have to start all over again. So it's a pretty tricky business, and unfortunately the last piece in the process many times when it comes to actually creating an artistic work.
Perfect. Yeah, makes sense.
Gosh, what else can I cover here? Any other questions that came in there, Kevin? Anything you want me to touch on specifically, or?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we spoke a little bit about, and this resonates very true with me, because I hear this all the time. People say, you have so many papers to choose from, Kevin, where do I start? And you touched on this very briefly, because people are going to come to you with what they think is a project, maybe yes, maybe no, or and then you can kind of create the end result for them and put something in their hands that they never really thought of. And that's the advantage of coming to something like Smokestack, right? And you can help demystify how many papers there are on top of that, making recommendations. And as you said, you could bring in a separate paper if they were sold on whatever that you don't carry. But that is a process in your expertise. People carry a lot on their shoulders in terms of camera gear, and it really doesn't make much sense to go to a warehouse club and have their prints done. That just doesn't make sense. They don't need to print everything, and even if they printed some of their stuff, but they wanted to print wider, they can come to you and your expertise. And the mounting, as you said, kind of looks easy, but I kind of know it's not easy.
Yes, yeah. Not only not easy, but needs to be done right, using the right materials, just like anything. And I think paper selection is one of those things. And we're all so used to now dealing with images on a beautiful backlit HD, super HD monitor that pops every little bit of detail and whatever else. And so that oftentimes making that switch from an on-screen image to a printed image can be quite challenging, and and in some cases, I don't want to say disappointing, but you're like, oh well, like I thought I liked it better on the screen because it's so it's got that punch, that wow factor. But when you see images in print, that's when they really start to take on life, right? In a computer, an image is just a bunch of zeros and ones. It doesn't have any physical presence. And it's that point at which we print an image that it becomes a real physical, tangible thing. And selecting a paper that's going to do the most justice to that thing is kind of what we're all about. And is a big step in the process. So working with someone who understands that is really important. And some of the things that will, when I'm first starting to work with someone, if they bring me an image, they say, hey, I want to print this. My first two questions are usually, well, do you just to even point me in the right direction? If I've never seen the image, it's like, do you have a preference of matte or gloss? Like in your mind's eye, do you imagine it as being matte, or do you imagine it as being gloss? Do you imagine it as being textured, or do you imagine it being smooth? And I guess the other piece to that is, do you imagine it having a really bright white base, or are you looking for something that's a little bit more natural? The bright white base is important because fine art printers don't print white ink. So it's important to note that the white of the paper always makes up the white of the image. So if you've got, a scene that has a bunch of just, really pure white in it, and you want it to remain that way, printing on a paper that has a really clean white base, like the Hahnemühle Photo Rag Bright White, is a really great option. For me, like I mentioned, because a lot of my own work has been focused around gardens and landscapes and that kind of stuff, the warmth of the bamboo paper is a real benefit for me. And then along with that, there are a lot of other subtleties that start coming into play from one paper to the next. Maybe it's the depth of the black. So one of the things that I found in the last number of years is that in the kind of fine art or contemporary art world, there's been a big trend of people photographing objects against pure black backgrounds. And of course, people always want to print it on matte paper, which is exceedingly difficult because any scratch in the paper that may have come from handling or manufacturing or just whatever it might be, these things happen, will show, and you got to run the print again. And so, there again, the texture of the paper is going to play into how that black looks on the page. No two papers have a black depth that's exactly the same. So the black depth of the Hahnemühle Photorag Bright White is going to be slightly different than the hemp paper, which might be slightly different from the agave, although they're actually very, very, very similar. You probably wouldn't even notice the difference between the two. But say something like the Photorag Bright White against Epson Hot Press, which is an okay paper, but when you see the two next to each other, there isn't even a comparison. Not to mention that both are branded as bright white papers, but when you put the Epson next to the Hahnemühle, the Epson looks like a natural paper, looks yellow. And then along with that as well, depending on if there's a difference between whether you're printing something just to have at home or whether you're printing something that's going to end up in a major museum. Because oftentimes museums are very picky about the kinds of things that come into their collections. And so having someone that's knowledgeable about the ingredients of the paper, whether it's a cotton rag paper, or whether it's a blend like some of the new Hahnemühle natural line papers, whether it's an alpha cellulose paper, whether it's acid-free and linen-free. So, these are things that I kind of have and any time I bring in a new paper, it's part of my job to inform myself on what those ingredients are, so that when people come to me and say, hey, I need a truly archival paper for this reason, I can stand behind and I can give them that information.
You've just said a couple of interesting things to me, and when somebody comes to Smokestack and sits down with you and has an idea in their head, they are stuck at that process. You're already visualizing the end result. You already kind of say, oh, bamboo, for a lack of better, this needs to be printed on a warm tone smooth paper. You're already there. So all you have to do is pull that string out of their head and lead them along the way, assuming that they don't know, or that they're going to say, Jonathan at Smokestack, he's going to take care of me. This is where we're going to end the result. That's interesting that you're already at the end thinking for them. And that's your expertise based on years of experience doing that. And to me, as a photographer, I'd say, yeah, this is the kind of help that I need, because I'm stuck. And I think a lot of people are stuck in that. I did get a question from Los Angeles wanting to know how to be in touch with you. I did post on your website, but I will post again. I believe your email address is in your profile on the platform. Yep. And if it's not, then they can get in touch with you in your website. So yeah.
In the contact section on our website, you'll see you'll see my email listed there, so you can get in touch with me directly that way.
And Jonathan is very responsive. So Yorman is back again with another great question. Jonathan mentioned tangible, but a print on paper is being held as very satisfying compared to the print on a hard mount, and intagliato print is even better. Are we getting into the mechanical age too willingly? Oh, that's an interesting. I don't know the answer to that. That's a tough one.
As in, I guess I would need a little bit of clarity on exactly what the question is, but I think maybe is it like, are we abandoning analog print in favor of, like, certainly there's something to be said between the difference between an intaglio based print and the same print made digitally, or a reproduction of an original. Certainly the tangibility of an original is always, there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, it's something that we talk about here a lot, like my brother in particular, he's a master in a process called mezzotint. Mezzotint predates photography, predates the printing press, but was known for the ability to achieve high realism as part of the process. And that's certainly something that in my brother's work, is very obvious, but it's absolutely painstaking. It takes hours and hours and hours. Let me pull you over here to see. He's got one of his plates up on the wall here. So this is, might be a little bit hard to see here. This is the mezzotint plate. Let me see if I can actually pull it off the wall and show people a little bit more clearly. So this is the mezzotint plate. It's a copper plate that has been drawn into by hand. So you start by essentially rocking in a copper, a pixel matrix of sorts into the plate itself, which once you print it would print completely black, and then you're working back to white. So to prep the plate, you're looking at like maybe 20, maybe 100 hours worth of work just to start the plate. And then you start drawing, and you only get one shot to do the drawing. So in that sense, you could spend 100 or hundreds of hours just creating the plate, at which point you're then able to start printing it, at which point you then might need to make more revisions to the plate. And at most, you're probably getting 40 to 50 editions out of a plate, including the print, including the testing, and all of the edition prints. So, there's something to be said for the handmadeness of that and revealing all of the work that goes into it. But I guess it begs the question, is that in some way inherently better? Are we losing something by not doing, could that same drawing, could that same thing be created digitally? Well, yeah, it probably could be with a very similar end result. I guess it ultimately just comes down to where you, whether you're a collector or a maker, where you find value in placing your time or, your connection to the object. As someone who loves collecting print-based work, not just photography, but I'm talking about like traditional printmaking. That's something, I appreciate the effort that went into it, the touch of the artist's hand. So I think, well, there is certainly a ton of emphasis on the mechanical world and digital production and those kinds of things. There are very much still places and people keeping the analog and the handmade alive and well. And I think the two have a place to coexist.
That's interesting. A question came up regarding, can you or do you work long distance with artists?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've printed for artists in the States, in Europe, all over the place. So that's not a problem.
That's what I thought. So you have a big footprint, you have an impressive website. Lots of things.
I'd say it needs a bit of an overhaul, but it tends to be one of those things that gets kind of kicked down the road all the time when you're busy with actually making.
Yeah, right. I want to be respectful of the time. I know Jonathan has a commitment he needs to run to, and we have another event shortly after this. If there's any last minute questions, and I see one just popped up here in the Q&A, how do you control color? That's a good question that's come up several times in other. How do you control color temperature of your lighting throughout the studio for print evaluation? That's a good point, because it looks to me like you've got a light coming in from windows.
Yeah, so obviously on this side in the analog print studio, we've got open windows and that kind of stuff. It's not really as critical a thing on this side of the studio as it is on the digital side. take you back over there really quickly just so you can check it out and see. Over on this side, all of the lighting in here is controlled. Those windows never open. So it's always controlled in that sense. These lights are all 5,000, 5,500K. I can't remember exactly what the bulbs are. I think they're like 5,500. So in that sense, you know, this room is completely controlled. And that's actually one of the things that I have in my kind of future infrastructure planning, is to further refine the lighting in this space, either possibly through a viewing box or something like that. But then of course, over on the other side here, we've also got the photon lights, which are probably about as highly tuned a set of lights as you could possibly get. So for any work that needs to be like absolutely color proofed under 5,000K lights, this is the place to do it. And of course, we're inside of a black void here. This is completely tarped in, so there is no light other than these lights that comes into this space. So that's how we do it.
This is such an impressive place. I've been there, although now that the borders open back up and we can get back in the US without having to test, I was going to come up in March, but we were struggling with deciding how to work through that. But we will be up very
well.
short.
All the restrictions are gone now, so you're welcome to come up and go back as you please, and we'll be looking forward to having you.
I appreciate that. I think we're good with questions. Jonathan, I can't thank you enough for letting us a peek behind the curtain at Smokestack Studio. It is an impressive place. They really know what they're doing. I will again, Smokestack Studio, and I did post their website along with their Instagram page. And thank you, brother. We're sorry we missed him this time, but let's do this again.
I would love it. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for attending, and certainly if there's anything that I can help with, don't hesitate to send an email, even if it's just questions about things. You know, a big part of what we do here is also education. And educating people, even if it's not because we're working on a project. If we can help to try and demystify the process or inform someone's decisions, happy to lend our expertise where we can.
I love that. And Jerry Nielsen and Will from Amplis, thanks so much. And I will say it again, we love details. That's what it says on their website, and you can tell. Jonathan, thank you again for your time. Thanks everybody for watching. We're off to San Antonio next, so join us. Thanks again, Jonathan.
Awesome.
Later. Yeah,
thank you. See you soon. Bye.